You guys wanted Pokemon conspiracy theories? Well, you got them. Now, take the word conspiracy lightly here. A lot of these things get overhyped and people start to think the Game Freak's actually trying to, like, hide certain facts from us. I mean, I don't really think there's some conspiracy surrounding Gengar being Clefable's shadow or the truck by the SS Anne that didn't end up doing a damn thing and I spent days trying to get to it! But it's a lot of fun to think about. Pokemon is such a strange and magical world, and it's so different from ours that when we try to apply our own reasoning to it, we start to come up with some pretty crazy ideas. Here they are. Number 5. Giratina is the devil. This is a pretty cool Generation 4 theory that I'm a fan of conceptually. Generation 4 was quite godly, and I don't mean that it was the best, but that it literally introduced Pokemon gods for the first time ever. They never say it outright, but that's kinda how people have interpreted Arceus and the Creation Trio. I mean, it's confirmed that Arceus created Sinnoh, and maybe even the whole Pokemon world, so it seems like a pretty logical conclusion. Not only that, but just like in the Bible, God created angels before the world, and Arceus made the Creation Trio, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, before creating Sinnoh. Now, for those who don't know, the TLDR story of the devil is that he used to be an angel who chilled up in heaven with God and all the other angels. One day he tried to start a rebellion and wham! He was banished to hell. Giratina is known as the Renegade Pokemon, and its Pokedex entry states that it was banished to the Distortion World for its violence. Sound familiar? Well, it doesn't stop there. Giratina's two forms resemble a serpent and a basilisk, which are two creatures the devil commonly took the form of in the Bible. Giratina also has 6 legs, 6 ribs, and 6 spikes in its altered form, and 6 wings, 6 ribs, and 6 spikes in its origin form. Looks like whatever Pokemon number 666 ends up being is going to have some serious competition. The only problem I see with this theory is that Pokemon is an Eastern game heavily influenced by Asian cultures in its design, and this theory applies a Western religion to it. There are actually a lot of Eastern creation stories that fit Arceus a lot better than just calling him God like we do, so it might not be as simple as God and the devil, but hey, it's a cool theory anyway, and that's why it's on the list. Number 4! Cubone is a baby Kangaskhan. This is a pretty old and popular theory, and I bet most of you know it, but it's definitely one of my favorites, probably because it seems so likely. The theory is as follows. Cubone is known as the lonely Pokemon. It's said to wear the skull of its deceased mother on its head to hide its identity. Many people think that if a mother Kangaskhan dies, the baby in its pouch will wear her skull and use one of her bones for protection and become a Cubone, and then later evolve into a Marowak due to its change in lifestyle. This is largely based on how much like Cubone baby Kangaskhan looks. Now, back in the day, we didn't have all these crazy types of evolutions involving held items, so they just decided to make them different Pokemon entirely. If Cubone had been developed nowadays, the baby Kangaskhan might have to level up while holding a skull to evolve into Cubone. There's actually some evidence to suggest that this was the case back in Red and Blue. The glitch Pokemon M actually evolves into Kangaskhan when leveled up, suggesting that there may have been some unused code for a pre-evolution. Not only that, but Cubone and Marowak learned the move Bonemerang, which, like Kangaskhan, is based on an Australian theme. So there you have it. Next theory. Number 3. The legendary beasts are reincarnated evolutions. This is another theory that seems very much like it could be true. Johto's Ecruteak City is an old town surrounded in history and tradition. Hundreds of years before the events of Pokemon Gold and Silver versions, the city was home to 2 towers, the Brass and Tin Towers, rather than just one. However, the Brass Tower was struck by lightning, caught on fire, and was eventually extinguished by the rain. It's said that 3 Pokemon perished in the flames, but were resurrected by Ho-Oh. These 3 Pokemon were Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, who upon realizing the extent of their power fled off into the wild for you to chase around forever. These Pokemon represented the lightning that struck the tower, the fire that burned it down, and the rain that extinguished it. The theory is that the 3 Pokemon that perished were in fact Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon. Aside from the obvious matching types, they have similar stat distributions and are all quadruped, cat, dog, ambiguous mammal things. I actually noticed something that backs this theory up quite well. Ecruteak is home to the Kimono Girls, who are all dancers and Pokemon trainers. Trainers who happen to always have one evolution. The Kimono Girls exist in present day, but it is extremely likely that they go way back in the city's history, seeing as how the way they dress is very traditional. The games even state that Bill's mother was a Kimono Girl. It wouldn't be surprising at all if the Kimono Girls were in Brass Tower doing a performance or something when it caught on fire, resulting in 3 evolutions dying. Now, there is something in this theory that deserves to be examined a little closer. When Ho-Oh resurrected these Pokemon, he gave them the power of the lightning, the fire, and the rain. So they wouldn't necessarily have to have had those powers before they died. But what if The Pokemon that died were actually Eevees. And when Ho-Oh gave them their unique powers, rather than the normal boost in strength they get from an evolution stone, they got a big boost from Ho-Oh's power that made them different from how Eevee normally evolves. Eevee was probably a popular choice in that town, thanks to the Kimono Girls, so it's really something to think about. Number 2? Killing Blue's Raticate. This is one of those theories that kind of made me whoa when I heard about it. It's pretty common at this point, but it's so interesting that it's definitely worth talking about. The theory is as follows. In Pokemon Red and Blue, your rival, who we'll just call Blue and not Asshat, Dildong, Douche, etc., has a few battles with you in the beginning of the game in which he uses a Rattata and later a Raticate. He has his Raticate when you battle him on the SS Anne, but after that, it's never seen again. In fact, the next time you run into Blue, he's in the Pokemon Tower paying his respects. To what, you might ask? His dead Raticate, that's what. Rumor has it that you injured his Raticate very badly on the SS Anne, and what with it being a ship and all, he couldn't make it to the Pokemon Center in time, and thus his Raticate actually died. When I first played Pokemon Blue, the concept of Pokemon actually dying was something I didn't think they were going to touch, so I was certainly surprised when I found out Lavender Town's Pokemon Tower was packed with gravestones and people saying that yes, Pokemon can in fact die. The death of Blue's Raticate represents his loss of innocence. It is upon his Raticate's grave that he swears to become better than you, defeat you, and make it to the Pokemon League to become champion. He does reach his goal for a brief moment, but you dethrone him soon after, disgracing him in front of Professor Oak, his only living relative. You'd feel kinda bad for the kid if he wasn't such a tool to begin with. I'd have to say there's a good chance this theory is true. It's at least implied that Blue loses one of his Pokemon, and it adds a lot of depth to his character. Number 1! The Great Pokemon War. This is by far the coolest Pokemon theory in my opinion. It's one I've heard about for a long time, and it goes all the way back to Generation 1. It pretty much spawned from the dialogue you have with Lieutenant Surge when he says, "I tell you, kid, electric Pokemon saved me during the war. They zapped my enemies into paralysis, same as I'll do to you." Wait, what? War? What war? Your enemies? Was there some kind of war where Pokemon were actually used in battle against humans? I mean, think about the destructive power some Pokemon possess. Each one has the potential to be a pretty powerful weapon, and some could be considered weapons of mass destruction without a doubt. Ever notice how in Red and Blue there's an absence of adult males? Everyone's either a kid, old, or somehow tied to the government or organized crime. You only have a mother, your rival is an orphan, everyone else is in the Navy, Team Rocket, or some other kind of gang. So where did all the other men go? They died in the war, that's where. Imagine soldiers storming the coast mounted on the backs of battle-ready Blastoise and Gyarados, an air force mounted upon Charizard and Pidgeot, a front line fighting side by side with Machamp and Nidoking. Could this get any more epic? It's no wonder Professor Oak is in such a hurry to stop you from going into the tall grass without protection. Them shits are dangerous! And speaking of Professor Oak, I thought he studied Pokemon his whole life. He only has 3 left? Where the hell did the others go? Maybe they died in the war! Why are so many kids just wandering around with no supervision? This theory is just so nuts you can start to apply it to every aspect of the Pokemon world and it makes a lot of sense. But do I think this theory is true? Honestly, I don't. At the end of the day, Pokemon is a kid's game, and I don't think the developers really intended for something like this to be the true past of the Pokemon world. But there are a lot of people working on any given video game, and maybe some clever writers out there found it fun to sneak little hints between the lines just to make our experience with the game more interesting. It's these ambiguous little Easter eggs that clever fans spot that make the world of Pokemon so much more colorful. You like video games? Well, that's what this channel's about, damn it! Check out these other stupid-ass videos I made. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, hit me up on Twitter or Facebook. Links are in the description. Oh, and Scooter says make sure you subscribe or you'll end up like Blue's Raticate, if you know what I mean.